This is how to lose an economy in 10 weeks. The economy has been tanked.
One of the maddening things about where we are right now is that it's self-inflicted.
My anxiety is through the roof.
The only thing being liberated here is money from our 401ks and our savings accounts and from our pockets. This is bad.
Hi, everybody. Welcome into this episode of Sanity with Dave Briggs and Allison Camerata. Dave, cast your memory back, if you can, 6 months ago, while we were in the presidential campaign, while it was going on. And you'll recall that Donald Trump promised to turn around the economy. He and Republicans who supported him, the MAGA crowd, said that the economy was, in the toilet, that Joe Biden had destroyed it. And a lot of consumers did see the price of their eggs. They were high. Price of gas at some point was high. However, by election day, both those metrics had come down. Well, Donald Trump promised on day one that he would fix the economy. It seems as though that was an empty promise, and it seems as though everything he promised then has gone in the opposite direction.
Do you remember the movie How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days?
Mm-hmm.
This is how to lose an economy in 10 weeks. Now, if you picture those two faces different as Trump and Vance, that's kind of a disturbing image, but I joke because I don't know what else to do. The economy has been tanked in 10 weeks. Not minor tweaks, but straight in the tank. You're talking about trillions of dollars wiped off the stock market. That was the single metric that Donald Trump measured his success by in the first term. The single metric is now devastated. Even those companies that walked up and wrote $1 million checks, Amazon, Apple, Nvidia, devastated today by these 10% around the world tariffs, and in some cases 2, 3, 4, even 5 times that rate, depending on the trade imbalance. And I don't see any happy ending here. We talked to Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's, and I've talked to a dozen economists. They can't see a happy ending here because tariffs have never worked. The only time we really did this, it worsened the depression.
It's interesting because the stock market is one metric. It's not all of them. And so the stock market has plunged. Yes. Consumer confidence is a big metric in terms of the economy. That is plunging. And as you say, Donald Trump has never explained how the tariffs are going to help, since all economists are like, yeah, if there's going to be some sort of manufacturing renaissance, it's going to take years. And we're not even sure that that will ever happen. And by the way, I just want to point out that Russia has somehow been immune from these tariffs. He would say it's because sanctions are working, but Russia still exported $3 billion worth of goods to the U.S. So there's just...
And yet we hit Fiji higher than Russia.
Correct.
Who essentially has no economy other than tourism.
So, I just wonder, for the people who were waiting for this to turn around, for the cost of eggs to go down, it hasn't happened. And
the cost of eggs has started to come down.
Well, it already had started to come down by election day. On Joe Biden's watch, they had already started to come down. But it's not like they've come down remarkably on Donald Trump's watch.
No, but inflation is going to fire back up, and has been for about the last month or two, and is going to go through the roof now. When you talk about free trade, you can demonize free trade because we did ship jobs around the world. That's because we love cheap stuff. We get cheap iPhones. We get cheap Nikes. We get cheap clothes, and we love them. And what has free trade done? It's built our economy into the envy of the world, the strongest economy on the planet. I've talked to 2 different groups this morning. One, businessman. I asked a small businessman who's considerably wealthy, and I said, ballpark, what are these tariffs going to cost you? And he said, I'm trying to stay focused because he's a big Trump supporter. And I said, is it safe to say millions? And he said, it's safe to say it's millions of dollars. And I will have to lay off employees.
Is he angry?
Nope.
Why?
Because we'll see. It is the Trump line, we'll see. I've talked to the everyday worker, a couple of friends who don't have millions of dollars. They are more worried. They are far more worried because the possibility of a recession is now, in some people's minds, 40%. One economist said this will cost the average American $3,800 per year.
The businessman that you talked to, he's just taking the trust in Trump philosophy?
Because he doesn't know what else to do. He has no power to change anything, so he's just going to put his faith in Trump. And then,
I think what's also alarming is that when you hear the administration speak, as Vice President J.D. Vance just did on Fox and Friends, it doesn't make sense.
And what actually happened. We had 1.5% inflation. We had the fastest growing economy in a generation, and we had the beginning of a manufacturing renaissance in the United States of America. Then, of course, we had 4 terrible years in the Biden administration. But I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on 2 principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America. For 40 years, we have gone down that pathway. We've seen closing factories. We've seen rising inflation. We've seen the cost of housing so high that most Americans can't afford to buy a home right now. President Trump is taking this economy in a different direction.
He is taking this economy in another direction.
Down.
He is tanking it. And let's unpack everything he said there. The first Trump administration, he said, helped inflation. Inflation was low.
Oh, but I
I
just want to jump in there. He said we had 1.5% inflation. He omits, conveniently, COVID. So in his whole equation about how Biden ruined this, he omits the COVID economy, the COVID inflation, post-COVID inflation. That, it can't be omitted.
Well, Biden did have a lot of responsibility in terms of rising inflation by flooding the system with far too much money. But J.D. Vance also said we had the best economy in the world. The economy was in decent standing. It did improve from the Obama years in that first Trump term. He talks about a manufacturing revolution. That never happened. That never happened and never will, according to most economists, because to your point, that takes years to build, plan, and hire. And they're not going to do that knowing that they might have an entirely different party or president in 3 years. And it's really hard to justify what they're doing because prices, as he said, are low. They're going to go up on everything we buy. This iPhone could cost 10 times what it does now if we make it here. No one wants that.
No. And I think that one more thing that doesn't have to do with dollars and cents, well, it sort of does, but it's not just about numbers, is relationships. So one of the things that the U.S. did for the past 80 years is have business and economic alliances with all of these different countries, because when you're in business together, you have a relationship. And so now alienating all of the countries around the world that we had these relationships with, how do they think that's going to end? Is that a happy ending?
And that begs the question, how will this end? And I presume there will be some countries that renegotiate trade agreements and Trump goes back and claims a minor victory here.
Sure. When Trinidad and Tobago renegotiate something, then I guess we'll all celebrate. But
right.
It's not, I mean, Europe isn't feeling that way right now.
They are unified. They are invigorated. And they are determined to fight the United States together as a bloc.
Oh, excuse me. Continue.
And it is difficult to figure out in Trump's mind how this ends well. And when you hear the people from his administration talk about it, it's clear they don't see how it ends happy. They're trying to bend themselves in knots, Howard Lutnick and others. And the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, said, well, it'll be fine if businesses don't pass on the cost to consumers. So he is literally telling American businesses to make less margin, many of whom are publicly traded companies who people own them in their pensions and their 401ks. That makes no sense.
Because they are going to pass it on to consumers. That's what everyone says. I mean, as you said, that we had Mark Zandi on Sanity a few days ago, and top economic analyst, and he said, prepare, put your head down, start preparing. You will right now want to start paying down your credit cards if possible. You'll want to start saving more than you did. Buckle in. And that was his advice. I mean, we like to have action items. That was his advice. That is really cold comfort for the vast majority of households. That's what we're supposed to do.
I got to tell you, my anxiety is through the roof. I can't imagine millions of people around the country that struggle to put food on the table. The other question here, how do Democrats fight this? Is this their moment to fight back, or do they follow James Carville's words and just sit and do nothing? We have the perfect guest to talk to about that. Congressman Jason Crow from the greatest state in the country, Colorado. I am a bit biased. Congressman, it's good to see you, albeit in a really scary day for millions of Americans and American businesses. The markets are tanking. They are already down considerably. The real fear of a global trade war and a recession are setting in. How scared are you? How should Americans feel today?
Well, first of all, I don't do fear. I don't run scared. That's just not in my MO. We have a big problem, and that problem is Donald Trump's version of or I should say definition of liberation is different from ours. Like, the only thing being liberated here is money from our 401ks and our savings accounts and from our pockets, right? This is bad. And I think this is all worth saying, that tariffs can be a useful tool when they're used in a surgical way as a scalpel, right? To ensure fairness, to address unfair trading practices, but never in the history of tariffs has broad-based comprehensive tariffs ever actually worked. What they've done is they've increased prices for working class Americans, and they've induced recessions, or in the case of the Great Depression, plunged us even further into the Great Depression in the 1930s. So this is not good stuff. People are going to be hurt pretty deeply by it.
And so, Congressman, what are people to do? What is the answer here? What's the action item? I mean, people feel like they're just sitting ducks right now because, as you know, Donald Trump really believes in them for whatever reason. I mean, it's hard, as you say, they've never worked. It's hard to know why he thinks this policy of sort of, I can only imagine, vendetta against people that he thinks have taken advantage of the U.S. What should people be doing right now?
Well, they should be calling their representatives and their senators, their elected officials, right? I mean, Donald Trump is going to do what people allow him to do. And so long as members of Congress and other folks are kind of giving him this permission structure to run roughshod over our economy, he'll do it, right? So I think it's really important people speak up, that they mobilize, they organize, they let their representatives know that they want their reps to be a voice for them with the administration. And we're actually seeing some of that occur, not as much as I would like to see, but there are some Republican senators, there are some Republican representatives who have made some statements saying this is basically crazy. This is going to hurt manufacturing. These are going to hurt businesses in my district. It's going to hurt our economy. But we need more, right? We need more voices to be a part of that chorus and for people to speak up here.
How do Democrats fight back without appearing to cheerlead a recession?
Yeah, well, we're certainly not going to cheerlead a recession, right? Because we don't want people to be hurt. I don't want people to be hurt. These are real people. These are the people I represent. Dave, these are our neighbors, right? The people we grew up with and around in Aurora. I think our job here, and as a Democrat, and listen, I'm a pretty independent guy. I mean, I am a very proud Democrat, but I don't always agree with the way the Democrats do things, and that's my job, to be the voice of the community and Coloradans in Congress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be as vocal as possible in Colorado to explain what's happening, what isn't happening, my view on what we should be doing differently, and help people speak up and to organize against this, right? And if this does create massive problems for our economy here locally, I'm going to do what I did during the pandemic. I'm going to hold workshops for small businesses. I'm going to let them know what resources are available. I'm going to invite the Small Business Administration to come and help our small businesses work through this. I'm going to provide as much information as I can about what's happening, what's not. So much of our job actually is just that direct service providing to our community, like directly going to our constituents, directly going to the businesses that we represent, and finding any and every way we can to help them, right? And that you have to be creative about that sometimes.
One of the maddening things about where we are right now is that it's self-inflicted. This isn't COVID. This isn't a global epidemic that's affecting our economy. It's, one man's belief in terror. What are Coloradans telling you? What are your constituents saying today?
Yeah, I mean, Colorado is generally not behind this agenda, right? And That's not to say there aren't some things that I can agree with. I'm going to call balls and strikes here. I predominantly disagree with the approach of this administration. And what I'm hearing from folks is they're worried. They're worried about, as you said, self-inflicted pain, right? Like that. One of the things that kills me the most here is that there is so much good happening around this country, right? There's so much innovation. There's so much ingenuity. The things that businesses are doing in Colorado, the innovation happening at the Anschutz Medical Campus, just a mile away from where I'm sitting right now, on biomedicine and biotech, the defense and aerospace industry that I represent. I represent one of the largest space and aerospace industries in the country. I have 260 businesses like building satellites, creating batteries, doing counter drone technology, like incredible stuff, right? Problem is, we're creating all this self-inflicted pain. The administration is, whether it's pulling back from our allies, maligning our partners around the world, taking a sledgehammer to essential government services, cutting back on our healthcare agencies, or in this case, taking a sledgehammer to our economy. It's really tough to see. And the impacts of this are going to be even tougher to see in the months ahead.
I'm going to ask you the toughest question you'll face today. Give me one thing you like that the Trump administration is doing or has done.
Well, that is a tough one. No, the one thing, no, I say that half in jest because it's hard right now because there's so many things that they're doing that's causing a lot of damage. But one area in which I do align with them is on the creation of a Space National Guard. So when we created the Space Force under the first Trump administration, actually Congress created this, and I was on the Armed Services Committee at the time, and then President Trump signed it into law. I was a big proponent of that. I thought it was the right move to create a Space Force, an entirely new branch that would elevate space as the new domain, the new high ground, so to speak, and national security, because our adversaries have been and continue to do a lot in space that threatens us. So I thought that elevation was the right move, and President Trump has been a proponent of the Space Force. And then, but what we didn't do when we created the Space Force is we didn't create a reserve component of the Space Force. So there's like the Army National Guard, there's the Air National Guard, there's the Marine Reserve, like every other branch has a reserve or National Guard component except for the Space Force. So what I've been trying to do, I actually have a bill, I'm the lead on this, is create a Space National Guard for those states that have guard units that are doing space missions, so that it would elevate the Space Force to be on par with the other branches. I fought the Biden administration on this. They disagreed with me. They didn't want to do it. So I kind of battled with them over it. Ironically enough, with this administration back into office, I'm aligned with them again on this. And I have a better chance of passing this bill, which I think is the right thing to do.
Speaking of space, that brings us to Elon Musk. There's some reports that he's on his way out. Do you have any thoughts on if he's accomplished his mission with Doge?
Well, I'm not sure what his mission was, other than get a lot of attention and try to focus media on himself. But good riddance is my view. He's doing a lot of damage. He's making a mockery of really important functions. But all of that, putting all that aside for a minute, I think one thing we have to recognize here is that Doge is a response to a legitimate problem. Right? There's a legitimate problem that exists, and that is government doesn't work the way that it should. In so many examples, right? Like it takes 5 to 10 years to build a bridge. Like it takes decades to build tunnels and rail systems that are billions of dollars over budget. There are innumerable examples of inefficient, slow things that are not working, that waste taxpayer dollars, that are making life difficult for businesses and Americans. Like that is true, right? Now, the response to that, the answer to that, is not to take a sledgehammer and then just destroy everything and cause damage to Americans' lives and actually get rid of incredible civil servants and very, very skilled people that are doing great work. That's not the answer. The answer is actually a bipartisan, real effort to reform, which we actually did before under the Clinton administration in the 1990s. The last real effort that we undertook that led to some significant reforms. So I'd like to get back there again. And I think we should get back there again and have that. But DOJ is standing in the way of that effort.
And Congressman, one thing that stands out about you is your ability to criticize your own party, and many have called you the new recruiter for the Democratic Party. What's been the biggest mistake Democrats have made that have left them with a 29% approval, the lowest ever, according to CNN polling?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here, right? Democrats do a lot of great things. Like, I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat, right? I'm a Democrat because I grew up in a working class household. I worked since I was 15 and in fast food, and then I worked in construction to put my way through college. And I'm a Democrat because I believe that hardworking blue collar people don't want answers. They don't want people to answer things for them or to give them a handout. All they want is a fair shake, right? People want an opportunity to succeed, and they want the playing field to be level, and they know that the game is rigged. That's why I'm a Democrat, because the Democratic Party is the party that is actually trying to address that and deal with it. Now, that said, you can't look at the last election and say that we're killing it, right? We lost 90% of American counties, right? You look at a map, right? And it's largely cities where Democrats govern and win, and then every place else it's red. That's a problem, and I think we need to acknowledge it. And part of that is a large number of people in the country just don't believe that Democrats respect them and understand them, right? Democrats think that we're having a policy discussion when in fact we're having a discussion about respect and identity and belonging. And, you know, I remember when I was working in construction, you'd get on that construction site early in the morning and shake everyone's hand, and you're feeling their hands, right? You're doing the callus check. You're feeling, what kind of hands do they have? Are they one of us? Are they one of me? And that the example of that, you know, the lesson of that is that people want to know who you are, and then you see them and you respect their way of life before they'll listen to you and hear all the answers you have, right? And that's what Democrats so often have failed to do, is connect with people and respect and show up, right? We have opted out of so many things. Like, I'm sorry, you got to go on Fox News, you got to go on Rogan, you got to go everywhere and make your case. If you don't show up, then people don't think you care. So that's why I go on Fox News all the time. Is I may not be reaching everybody, but you know what? I believe things. People should hear what I believe, and I should be able to defend that in front of any audience and any group of people. And that's important to me. And maybe if I'm not reaching the main audience, maybe I'm reaching somebody else sitting in the room. Maybe it's playing in a cafe or in a waiting room, and I'm reaching somebody else in there. So I'm making my case to everybody. I'm going everywhere. I'm treating everyone with respect, and I'm trying to doing a little bit of our own flooding of the zone.
I know you're about out of time, so just two quick questions. One, as a former Army Ranger, not as a member of Congress, how do you talk to Trump on Fox News about Signalgate, about our national security team using Gmail and Signalgate to talk about ongoing attacks and wars? Again, speak to the other 50% about why that's concerning to you.
Well, my frame, it's such a great question. My frame is a little bit different here, because there's a lot of people talking about process, talking about, you know, the Espionage Act being violated, the law being violated, and all those things are probably true. But what I think about as somebody who started my career as a private, I was enlisted first, I was a private, and then I later became an officer and was a paratrooper and ranger. All I think about are those troops downrange, doing extremely hard missions. I was in special operations. I did tough missions. I mean, these are hard missions. This is like a professional football team doing a highly choreographed thing. Everything has to go right? And there's no acceptance of failure, and you have to be perfect, right? And that's the standard, right? And the problem for me is not only by talking about all this stuff over an unsecured platform, we're putting all these people at risk, which we are, because our adversaries are actively trying to get that information, and they do get some of that information sometimes. So by putting that information out there, we're putting our troops at risk. But also, let's talk about the message that it sends. When my first day in boot camp, I learned that the foundation of military leadership is leadership by example. That is the single most important thing. You set the example for others to follow. Doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do, right? And the example that you set. That's the foundation of military leadership. And that takes several forms. Like when I was a paratrooper, you're in that plane, everyone's getting ready to jump. The most senior person in that plane jumps first. The highest ranking person jumps first. And then everybody else follows. And then when you're out in the field and the food comes, when you finally get some hot, fresh food, which doesn't happen often sometimes, but you get some food, your soldiers eat first. And then only when there's food left and everyone is eaten, then you eat, right? That's military leadership. The message this administration is sending is the opposite. If you're at the top, then the rules don't apply to you, right? You can do whatever you want and it doesn't matter. There's no accountability. But I'm sorry, if you're a private, if you're a sergeant, if you're a captain, if any of those people had done that, had been reckless with that information or done what these folks did, they would be done, right? They would lose their job. There would be an investigation. There would be accountability. But, in Trump world, it doesn't matter if you're in charge because, again, the rules don't apply. And it's just the wrong message. And I'm really deeply concerned for the impact on the morale of our troops as a result of that.
Congressman, we know you have to go. One thing we do on the Sanity podcast, because we live in such maddening times, is to ask our guests what their dose of sanity is. How do you stay sane?
I work out. I have to my team knows this. They're like, listen, if you don't give me time to run or go to the gym in the morning, I'm a basket case. I can be ornery. I'm just, listen, I got to have my morning workout time. And I'm training for the Army physical fitness test. I haven't taken it in years, but there's a new one. There's a really hard one that the Army just rolled out a couple of years ago. So I'm going to take it this summer. And I've set a very ambitious goal for myself for how to perform. So I'm in training now to get back into fighting shape and to do well. So that's how I stay sane. And I go skiing with my kids too. Spending time with my kids and getting up on the slopes is my happy place.
That's wonderful.
I agree.
Right on.
I work out the crazy every morning. It's how I stay sane as well. Congressman Jason Crow from my hometown of Aurora, Colorado. Really appreciate the time.
Dave.
I'll see you at home this summer.
Yeah, we will.